Hello and welcome to part 2 of my video series about how Action Forces Baron Ironblood became Cobra Commander. 1985. Again. Since 1983, the Baron Ironblood and his Red Shadows had been Action Forces' main protagonists. But by 1985, that was about to change. As I mentioned in my previous video, Palitoy sadly had to end their production of their Action Force toy line. It was taken over by Hasbro, who wanted to replace Palitoy's Action Force with its own G.I. Joe, while still keeping the name Action Force. Hasbro, now owning Action Force, wanted to get rid of the Baron and the Red Shadows, and replace them with Cobra Commander and Cobra. Things were not looking good for the Baron. There was also the issue with Action Force story that had been running in Battle Comics since 1983. Even though the production of Action Force was to stop, Action Force and their story was still very popular amongst the children of the UK. So thankfully a decision was made to keep the continuity of the comics by transforming the Baron into Action Force's version of Cobra Commander. The fall of the Red Shadows. In a story which was ran in Battle Action Force comics, we would see the Red Shadows launch simultaneous terror attacks around the world. After the attacks, the Baron was in possession of hundreds of hostages and demanded the UN pay a ransom of over £200 billion in sterling. The UN had no choice but to pay the ransom, as there were so many lives at risk. Only to have the Baron double-cross them. Once the UN had paid the Baron, he then ordered his Red Shadows to kill all the hostages. And with that, the Red Shadows killed all the hostages and themselves in mass suicide attacks. Horrified at the turn of events, the UN decided it was time to end the Baron and the Red Shadow menace once and for all. The UN overwhelmingly voted for the destruction of the Baron and his Red Shadows, making the Baron world enemy number 1. Assigned to the task was the combined forces of Action Force. They were to seek and destroy all the known Red Shadow bases and, if possible, capture or kill the Baron. But hidden away in a secret location, the Baron was planning on fooling them all, by losing his Baron Ironblood identity forever. So, with Action Force poised to strike, the Baron only had one thing left to do. The Red Shadows had not been able to contact the Baron. He was not in any of the Red Shadow bases and no one knew of his whereabouts. Then suddenly, an image appears on the monitors throughout the Red Shadow bases. It is the Baron. The Red Shadows are relieved to see their beloved leader. But this is short-lived, as the Baron states that he no longer has need for the Red Shadows, and that he will soon be rid of them for good. It is at this moment that Action Force strike, and they catch the Red Shadows completely by surprise. The Red Shadows put up a good fight, but they are eventually defeated. And in the aftermath, there is no sign of the Baron. Was he killed in one of the attacks? No one knows, as there is no body to be found. The Cobra conversion. The Baron was missing, presumed dead, but this was all part of the Baron's plan. For the Baron had been hiding away in a secret location, working on creating a new terror organisation with a new leader at its head. In a couple of issues of the Battle Action Force comic, we were given a 2-part story, detailing the Baron's transformation into his new identity. Now, I apologise ahead of this as it's quite long, so you may want to grab a drink, sit down and relax. It reads as follows. Like a snake shedding its skin was the image Baron Ironblood carried in his mind as he planned his new move. The move was designed to throw off the world's intelligence services off his trail. His Red Shadow movement had become infamous, too infamous. His solution was to bring things to a head. He would make a smokescreen involving the mass sacrifice of all his Red Shadows to a man, while he himself went underground and took on a new identity. Ironblood chose a snake to emulate, the Cobra or Naja Naja to zoologists. Its unique spread hood made it unmistakable. It had been feared since ancient times. Its symbols are found within Asian civilizations and temples. Known as Naga temples, These were built to honour and placate them. One such Naga temple, long lost in the Southeast Asian jungle, had been revealed as a result of defoliation of the undergrowth from the effects of a nearby conflict. A team of Ironblood's Red Shadows were in the area trying to re-spark further unrest. They had managed to come upon the site by sheer chance. The temple was inhabited, but not by men. It was a giant snake den, and that shadow group was attacked with only one survivor. That survivor, however, managed to return to his master and make his report. That man later died, whether through the ordeal or at the hands of the Baron, it is unclear. But now the Baron had been given a personal advantage, a bolt hole only he knew about. Ironblood's planning accelerated. Having deliberately stoked up worldwide rage against the Red Shadow's multiple crimes, and having collected the largest ransom in the history of international terrorism, he disappeared. Just before his movement bases were raided by UN-sanctioned counter-terrorist teams. Now, believing himself to be alone, Ironblood resurfaced in Singapore, the famous international crossroads. He awaited 4 men, 4 specialists to help give him his new appearance, and above all, a new face. The first was a plastic surgeon from southern Africa. Bringing with him an item Ironblood had designed, a faceplate made of armoured plastic which was to be surgically implanted over Ironblood's features. This faceplate worked on a reverse light sensitive process. By day, in dazzling sunlight, it was to resemble a one-way mirror, and by night it completely darkened, so the overall appearance of his new face was cold, blank and soulless, like a cobra's eye. The second specialist to be summoned to Singapore was an armourer, who was bringing an item with him, a battle helmet, which would supplement the faceplate. Rimless and made of armoured fiberglass, the helmet was to be fixed to the crown of the faceplate, and then both items would be interlocked in a device that worked on a coded sequence. Plastic explosives would then be lined around the helmet. The wearer would be in fact a walking bomb. If anyone was to attempt to remove the helmet from the head without the proper code sequence, there would be an instant detonation. Another feature of the helmet was a short-range radio receiver built into the ear appliances. The helmet would also be, in effect, a miniature communications console. The third specialist was a military outfitter from Macau, near Hong Kong. He was to come with a newly designed uniform. The Chinese tailor had worked hard on the entire outfit. It was dyed a light blue, the colour of clear sky, or the colour of poisoned skin. The tunic, made of the finest weaved armour, was in fact a flak jacket. Finally, there was a fourth specialist, a herpetologist, a snake expert. This man had been summoned to lecture Ironblood on all the ways of the Cobra and to administer a course of injections. Just as the professional snake charmers of Asia have inoculations to enable them to work safely with their pets, Ironblood decided to make himself invulnerable and near superhuman. The herpetologist, in a series of communications, had told him more details on the Cobra and the leader amongst the entire species, the Hamadryad, or King Cobra. This snake stood out even amongst the other cobras. It was large, made its own private nest, ate other snakes, and its bite was so potent it could kill even an elephant. This was surely the creature Ironblood could identify with. In Singapore, awaiting the arrival of these specialists from all over the world to give him his new face and identity, Ironblood hit upon the new name in the future he would call himself. Like the Hamadryad, he would reign over even more ruthless movement than the Red Shadows, and he would call himself Cobra Commander. So, we'd been given the story of the Baron's first few steps to creating his new identity. In part 2, we'd see the Baron complete his transformation. It read as follows. The snake had shed its skin. Baron Ironblood, arch-terrorist, was now Cobra Commander. He had been attended by a team of international specialists, including a transplant surgeon. His new face, crowned by the helmet and the slimy blue uniform, resembled a king cobra with its outspread hood. The face was in fact a faceplate, an armoured shield. As Baron Ironblood, while wearing his Teutonic-styled mask, there had been an increasing danger of opposing snipers using laser sights to penetrate the visor slits. But that threat was gone. The uniform additionally helped. The tunic had armour woven amongst the fabric. It was in fact a flat jacket. Like the helmet, that uniform was sky blue, so making it difficult to be picked out when standing against a skyline. Similar uniforms, though of a darker blue, would be issued to recruits of the new movement. So again, he would not be easily singled out from amongst his followers. He would communicate with the followers by means of a shortwave radio receiver built into his helmet. Cobra Commander had now recovered from the laborious series of operations, the last of which had been a course of inoculations to render him immune from Cobra venom. Now the specialists who had carried out the operations and fittings were waiting throughout Singapore in hotel rooms for the massive payments they had been promised for their services. Cobra Commander decided to be as swift as a snake and decided to strike. The armourer who had fitted the helmet and the explosives had further fashioned a small hand weapon, a small signet ring that could eject a jet of liquid. The liquid was Cobra venom, and the device emulated a spitting cobra. And this was the way that the transplant surgeon would die in his hotel room, the horror in his eyes mirrored in Cobra Commander's faceplate. The Chinese outfitter, who had tailored Cobra Commander's new uniform, had just finished ordering 10,000 similar items to be shipped to Singapore. He died seconds after replacing the telex. With poetic justice, Cobra Commander had used a needle impregnated with venom. For the two remaining specialists, there were faster deaths, as Cobra Commander decided how to reward them for their help. The armourer was shot at point blank range by a pistol, and the herpetologist was blown up in his car. The Singapore authorities would not connect the deaths and would put it down to accidents or underworld feuds. The very next night, the commander slipped across Singapore to pay a visit to the island zoological gardens. He slipped over its fence and entered its reptile house, and, like an athlete, stripped off his tunic and deliberately entered the cobra cages and aroused the sleeping occupants. He was attacked approximately 40 times, but crawled on from cage to cage through the masses. Although the bites caused some initial pain, the venom had no effect whatsoever on his system, which was exactly the result he desired. He calmly left the cage, covered all traces of entry, donned his tunic again, and made plans to leave Singapore. A week later, he stood in the clearing in the shadow of a snake temple in Southeast Asian jungle that had been uncovered by a team of his Red Shadows. Amongst the items he had brought with him was a counter defoliant, which he used to spray the undergrowth and halve the thinning foliage. The temple was infested with cobras, but strangely, not one attack was attempted on him. The writhing masses in fact made way for him, as though they sensed his near superhuman power. They would, however, turn on any intruder. They would be useful to his security as a pack of guard dogs, but far deadlier. The commander's next step was to summon men to join his new movement and don similar uniforms. Then he would be ready to spread his new brand of unexpected terrorism, like a poison without a cure, across the world. Soon the whole population would be paralysed with fear at the sheer mention of the word Cobra. And so with that, we had the Baron completing his transformation into Cobra Commander. All that was left for him to do now was to recruit a new inner circle and raise his new army. And that concludes part 2. In part 3, I will cover the conclusion of Cobra Commander's story in Action Force, and the fact we ended up with 3, at the time, origin stories for Cobra Commander. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please like and subscribe if you did, and until next time, Cobra!